Hi, welcome back to another video, and in this one we're going to be taking a look at what has most definitely been obsessing me in sim racing for over a week since it was released, and we are back in RaceRoom Racing. Nearly said it wrong there. And we are looking at the Super Tourers DLC that landed, and this is just, for me, absolutely phenomenal content. We'll talk more about the content and why it's important in a moment when we get into a race. But what cars do we get? Well, we get 5 cars from the Super Touring classification. We get the Audi A4 Super Touring from 1995, we get the BMW 320 E38, the Honda Accord, the Volvo 850, the famous brick, and the Volvo S40, all in the Super Touring. Now, there's a lot more cars in the Super Touring category, and I believe, and really do hope, that we will be getting more of them coming in future DLC from RaceRoom. In particular, I'd really love to see the Ford Mondeo, and for me, the biggie, the Renault Laguna. And we'll come on to talk about why I'd really like to see the Renault Laguna in a short while. But what we're going to do now is we're actually going to head into a race. Now, I'm going to be starting from the back of the grid for this particular race. And we are at the Silverstone National Circuit. Okay, so here we are on the grid, about to start. I'm in the Honda Accord, because for me it's my pick of the bunch here. So most of the cars in the pack are front-wheel drive, so both of the Volvos and the Honda front-wheel drive. The Audi A4 was very unusual in the Super Touring regulations because it was four-wheel drive but carried a significant weight penalty to offset that. And from memory it was the only four-wheel drive that ever raced in Super Touring. In a similar way, the BMW was the only rear-wheel drive Super Touring car. And although rear-wheel drive touring cars are more common nowadays, back then, in the mid to late 90s when Super Touring was at its height, it was predominantly a front-wheel drive race category. These cars were the very definition of race on Sunday, sell on Monday. And they were hugely popular. So we're not talking hideously powerful cars here. We're looking around about 300 brake horsepower, the vast majority of them. And that gave them a certain appeal because they were still reasonably close to what you'd see in a showroom and what you yourself could actually be driving. So there was a massive appeal, and Super Tourers raced all over the globe in various countries. Now, I myself watched an awful lot of touring car racing back then. I've always been a big fan of touring car racing, but for me this was one of the high points. The cars were very relatable, the engines were lovely screamy things. You also had, from the interior view, just dominated by transmission whine, and that really was a predominant feature of these. And also, very much as it still is, the Super Touring category of cars, in particular the BTCC that I know of because that's what I watched an awful lot of, was what can be described very much as elbows out racing. This was fairly much a contact sport to a large degree, so you would see people bumping from behind, you'd see cars leaning on each other as they cornered. It was no deliberate punting, but it was aggressive racing, and the cars suited that. The tracks tended to suit that, certainly in the BTCC, and it led to some really competitive racing, and the cars just seemed really well balanced back then as well. So there wasn't any real dominance, and when one car started to dominate, that's when it got penalised. The Audi A4 is a good example. It got the weight penalty because the four-wheel drive advantage that it gained from it. So this is a class of cars that a lot of people have been hoping for in terms of official content for a very long time in a contemporary sim, but it's never really materialised. You know, the last time I can remember seeing Super Tourers in games were back when the series was actually on and people were looking at official content like the Toca Race Driver series from Codemasters way back in the 90s. So what does that mean for RaceRoom? How well has this class of cars been recreated? And the answer to that is, in my opinion, absolutely brilliantly. These are great fun to drive. You've got a whole lot of grip from the tyres. The engines are not ludicrous, so actually losing it from the car itself is relatively uncommon. They are reasonably easy cars to drive up to the limit. The front wheel drive cars are actually fairly easy to recover over the limit. Most spins and things like that tended to happen from contact, and this meant that the drivers, and you, if you give this a go, can really drive these cars right on the edge, right on the limit, and focus on the racing itself and your competition. In this case with the adaptive AI in RaceRoom, and you can focus on that rather than the car itself. And this led to some incredibly close and competitive racing, and makes it just absolutely great fun. So this is a pack that I do strongly recommend. I think it's around about £14 in the UK for the 5 cars and all of their liveries, which I think is good value for money. Certainly I've enjoyed it massively off of the back of that. And will continue to do so. And I really do hope, as I say, that RaceRoom complete the sort of the Super Touring roster, and we get some of those cars I was talking about, like the Mondeo and like the Laguna. And the reason why I mentioned I want to see the Laguna is, back when the Laguna was racing in the, as I say, mid to late 90s, I was actually at that time working for Renault UK. And as a result, I was fortunate enough to attend an awful lot of the races that these cars took place in as a VIP guest, because they used to get complimentary tickets handed out. We get an email a couple of days before the race event. You return the email and basically say, yep, can I have a ticket? And bingo, you get a VIP ticket to the BTCC, which gave you, me and other people like me, paddock parking, which was brilliant, no parking in a public car park, hospitality all day, and access to the garage and behind the scenes and things like that. Couldn't take any photographs because they were naturally a little bit paranoid behind the scenes, but it gave some amazing access, and it really was fantastic to be able to do that and get close to the team. I mean, some of the drivers I met on quite a few occasions. Jason Plato, for example, raced for Renault for quite a while, and I met him on a number of occasions. So it was just, for me, a really memorable time, and I'd love to see the Laguna in here as part of this pack. But this is what we've got at the moment. For me, the great thing about it, all of the cars drive really individually. They have their own unique character to them, and that makes each one their own individual standout. A lot of people are going to pick up on their own preferences. The S40 Volvo is definitely the quicker of the 2 Volvos. That's not really a surprise. It was the later model. For more rear-wheel drive purists out there, the BMW's an absolute pick in that regard. The Audi A4 is very stable, but it is the slower of them. And the S40 and the Honda Accord are just really good classic examples of front-wheel drive super touring cars, or touring cars full stop, and you really can drive them quite aggressively. One handy trick to remember with front-wheel drive touring cars, and front-wheel drive race cars to a degree, but certainly the touring cars and the super tourers, is if you get it out of sorts, recovery is actually fairly easy. Just point the steering wheel and the wheels in the direction you want to go, and bury the throttle, and then rely on the diff and the traction to pull you back into a straight line. And if you watch some real world footage of touring cars, you'll see this used quite a lot as a technique to recover in a front wheel drive touring car. And some of the angles that drivers can recover from, and you can have a go too in RaceRoom, really are quite extreme. You know, there's some hefty angles that are recovered from simply by pointing the wheels in the direction you want to go and burying the throttle. Won't work every single time, but it works quite surprisingly a lot of the time. And, you know, just racing around here, this race that you've been watching here, you know, I had first lap contact that took me almost to the back of the field, where I failed to be able to recover it. And I've then spent the majority of the race just fighting back through the field here, and it doesn't diminish the enjoyability at all. It really doesn't. The adaptive AI in RaceRoom works really well. The racing is close and hard, and because the AI races so well against each other in RaceRoom, as you can see, I'm not just sat, you know, seconds behind the main pack in that regard. Because I was at the back, they were fighting, I was able to catch up and then start fighting for rear positions. You know, and we've got, what, a lap left on here, so I'll carry on talking through to this final lap. But this race was no less enjoyable fighting for, what, 18th odd place here with the Volvo in front than it would have been if I'd have been at the front leading, you know, or fighting for a podium place. It's one of the great things about RaceRoom is with its AI, the physics are top notch on this, the force feedback's excellent. It really does allow you to just get involved and get immersed, and it's just a great sim from that point of view. But this content in particular just works brilliantly for that. So that is the Super Touring Car DLC for RaceRoom. I strongly recommend it. It's a great piece of content, and if you've enjoyed this video, please do give it a thumbs up, and if you want to see more content like this, please do like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks very much everyone. Take care. Bye.